Hey everyone, welcome back to Miniature Painting 101, a series of videos where we teach you all about painting miniatures from start to finish and everything in between. And this is part 102. We're in the hundreds, people. Freehanding, specifically freehanding Ultramarine's symbols, but I'll show you the basics of freehanding and we'll continue in this series of videos. So as I said, we'll start off by freehanding a symbol, Ultramarine symbol, on this Space Marine Tactical Marine who already has his shoulder pad created. So, freehand can be a really scary process for new people. So let's break it down to some key steps when doing any freehand detail on a model. First of all, use thin paints, which either means use paints that are primarily thin, like P3 paints or Reaper, or you can thin down your paints with some acrylic medium, like I will do in this tutorial using some GW Citadel paint. Step 2 is break down the symbol. Break it down into simpler shapes if possible. Do one part of the shape at a time and then continue onwards. Don't try to do the entire thing in one long step if you don't have to, because what you find is that the more you break it down, the easier it becomes. Number 3 is start with a skeleton. So what I like to do is, as you'll see in this tutorial, I like to start with the very skeleton of the pattern, and then obviously with step 4, fill in the skeleton as needed in either direction. That way you can kind of control the thickness of it, and you can go in either direction to clean up the symbol or the pattern as you go. And the final part, this is especially important if you have a light symbol or a freehand over a dark background, but you can do it vice versa. Clean up with the background if you have the opportunity. So what I like to do afterwards is take a mid-tone color from the background and then use that to very much clean up the edges of the symbol, and that way you get a really nice clean symbol, but also the darkness that you just added around the symbol adds a little more definition. You find the symbol almost like an outlining and makes it really pop. So these are just some simple keys when doing freehand on a model. So now we're going to take some White Scar Citadel paint and add it to our wet palette. And as I mentioned, White Scar is a bit thick, so we're going to thin it down with some Lamium Medium, one of the acrylic mediums from the Citadel range, the technical range. I'll just add a little bit to the palette and then mix it. So that way we have a nice thin paint. The thinner, there's an intermediate tone basically is the best one. You don't want it to be too thin because then it'll just run everywhere, or too thick because then you'll show brush strokes. So we'll just take a little bit, add it onto our, this is a 00 brush, but you can do it with any brush that has a nice thin point. And as I said, we're going to do an Ultramarine symbol, which is just an upside down Omega symbol, so it's not too hard. So we're going to break it down to 2 steps. The first one is the cross section at the very top of the Ultramarine symbol. So we're going to just carefully and slowly create a nice straight line with a small gap in between on the shoulder pad. And you got to take into consideration the bend of the pad as well. But as you can see now, we have a nice straight line and with a small gap in between. And that is essentially the first part of the symbol. The next part of the Ultramarine symbol is the circle. It's basically like 80% of a circle, starting at one point before the gap and ending at the other point. So we're just going to slowly create a little bit at a time using our brush. We constantly have to reload the brush because of the amount of paint. But you just slowly and surely, using the nice thin paint and careful strokes. It's always good to prop up your arms to this, fill the circle of the pattern. Now we got our skeleton of our Omega symbol. Now it's not very nice. It's not perfectly symmetrical, and it's very thin. So now the next step obviously is to fill it in. So we're going to just make each line thicker by following that same pattern one stroke at a time and thickening up the lines with our brush until it's the thickness that we want. So once again, I'll start with the top lines and get them the thickness that we want for this Ultramarine symbol, which, as I said, is just an upside down Omega. One stroke at a time. And I always like to prop up my elbows when this to get nice, consistent sweeps with my brush along the surface. That's the key. Take your time and do nice, one stroke at a time, build up your pattern. And the key, as I said, use thin paints, because that way you won't see the brush strokes, and in the end you'll get a nice symbol on the shoulder pad. So now that we've got our top lines to where we want them to be for thickness, I'm just going to increase it slightly inward so that we get the small gap between the two parts of the omega symbol. Now we got the nice, as you can see there, the top stretch is much thicker than the part inside. So now we're going to do the same thing for the circle. And as you can see, I want to build it up along the inside of it. I found that that the gap was too large. The area in the side of the thing was too large, so I'm just going to build it a little bit on, actually mostly on the inside of the skeleton. But I'm also going to go slightly to the outside of the skeleton as well, just to thicken it up. And I'm just speeding it up slightly, that way it's not just a boring, me doing one stroke at a time. So as you can see now, it is a little bit thicker. And you can repeat this process until you get the thickness of the pattern that you really want. And as you can see, after just a couple more sweeps along the edges, as you can see, I'm just finishing it up right here. We got a nice, thick omega symbol upside down, and that's the ultramarine symbol. Once again, though, it can be a little bit cleaner. It can be a little bit sharper and have a little bit more definition. So now we're going to take a darker color. So we're going to take the ultramarine background color that we used to create this shoulder pad. In this case, the mid-tone, which is Altdorf Guard Blue. And I really want to go with the mid-tone as opposed to the lightest tone. The reason is because it will interact slightly with the color of the symbol. So you want to go with a darker tone than the final highlight. You want to go with the mid-tone for the shoulder pad in this case. And all I'm going to do is put a little bit on my brush. Of course, I thin it down slightly again with the Aluminium Medium. And I'm going to use this with my brush with nice small strokes to clean up the symbol and get a really sharp on each part. So I'm going to start off at the top to get a nice sharp line along the top part of the ultramarine symbol, and then I'm going to use it to clean up the very edges of them. So you can see now I'm just cleaning up the gap between the parts of the omega symbol. And then I'm just going to go around the center, and then around the very edges of the symbol, and just clean it up, just get a nice sharp line. And as I said, this will do two things. Number one, the contrast between the darker mid-tone blue and the symbol will create a little bit more of an edging of the symbol, and you'll find that it pops a little bit more. It has a little more definition, which is really nice. And so it'll be really clean and really pop. And obviously the second thing is it cleans it up and makes it look even nicer. So as you see, one stroke at a time, I'm just cleaning up the symbol one little bit at a time. And then I repeat this process along the outside part of it and in the end. And if you find that you go too thick, feel free to just clean it up a little bit more with the white, and then that's it. So as you can see now, I have a nice, really nice freehanded ultramarine symbol, showing the basics of freehand, in which we'll continue this with more symbols in the future. But that's how you do freehand an ultramarine symbol. Start with the top, do the loop around, create the skeleton, fill it in, and then use the background color to clean it up slightly. So as always, thank you so much for watching this episode of Miniature Painting 101. I really hope you enjoyed it and learned a little bit about freehand. Stay tuned for next week's episode, part 103. But if you don't want to wait for next week, check out The Warp. Click on the link below for a free 14-day trial to my premium YouTube channel, where not only will you get to see the next 6 months worth of Miniature Painting 101 episodes before anyone else, you'll get to see over 100 start to finish painting tutorials, battle reports, face-off episodes, and an Airbrush 101 series. Go check out The Warp. I think you'll love it. So thank you for watching. Until next time, this is Jay saying, happy painting, everyone.